Hi everyone, welcome to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder and welcome back to the show where we dig deeper to understand what really matters most in business. Today we're going to be talking about how to accelerate your leaders in the organization. And I'm pleased to welcome Cara Shortsleeve, who is the CEO of the Leadership Consortium. Hey Cara, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Thanks for having me.
That's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, tell them a little bit about who you are and who you serve.
Yep. So my name is Cara Shortsleeve, as you said, and I'm the CEO of a business called the Leadership Consortium. And so in layman's terms, what we do is accelerate leaders. I had the great fortune, I started the business with a professor from Harvard Business School named Francis Fry, and an amazing author and Thinkers 50 thought leader, Ann Morris. And together we work with some of the best companies in the world, which we're super proud of, across sectors and regions, and we work with their high potential leaders and hopefully help them do even better, more fulfilling work.
Well, first of all,
so that's who I am. And I just gonna say I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, so first of all, congratulations to your clients who are smart enough to recognize the need to develop the up-and-comers, because far too often that next gen of leaders has role models from folks that don't necessarily have the right attributes for leadership. But that's another story. But let's talk about some of the things that you're up to. And one of the terms that we hear an awful lot of is the concept of servant leadership. What does that mean, and is that still relevant?
I certainly believe it's relevant. In our practice, the way we think about it is we help leaders orient their leadership around the teams they are enabling. So our shorthand for it is that leadership is not about you. And that helps, I think, leaders understand their job is truly to ensure their teams are best prepared and best able to deliver. So you can call it servant leadership. I think, there's certain, I think a lot of people can grasp onto the concept that if you're doing your job right as a leader, it's the really hard and worthy work of clearing things out of the way for your teams to ensure they're able to do their best work.
Yeah, let's unpack that, Cara, if you don't mind. Let's really talk a little bit more about what those types of behaviors look like.
From the leaders. So what can you do in service of your teams?
Yes, exactly. What does servant leadership look like day to day?
So one of the things we talk a lot about is first working at the individual level. So what can you do for one team member, then what can be replicated for a team of humans, and then what can be replicated for organizations when you're really not even in the room. So at the individual level, we think a lot about this concept of setting both high standards and revealing deep devotion. It's a really neat concept that comes out of Francis Fry and Ann Morris's work. But I think it's familiar to all of us, the idea that if you have a really excellent coach, you're usually able to achieve a level that you didn't think you could. So that's the high standards. And deep devotion is that feeling that somebody has your back and they're going to support you and coach you through it. So the art is to set high standards and be there in service of your teams. It seems obvious. It's very hard. Many people get stuck in sort of one avenue or the other. But if you can do that at the individual level, you then think about how can you set standards and have support structures at the organizational level. And then you can think about what exists in my absence, when I leave the room. Like how does my team, sort of what infrastructure have I left in place that enables these fabulous humans to still see those high standards and feel supported in their efforts.
Thanks. When you're working with these younger up-and-coming professionals, one of the things that I've seen throughout my career is the challenges that they have in moving from, we'll call it doer to leader, where they've made friends at their level, and now maybe they've been selected as or identified as the next gen leader, and maybe some of their friends aren't, and they're being left behind. Any particular challenges that you see in helping them to go from that doer as a peer to the leader of that team?
The good and bad news is we see the challenge frequently. That's the tough news. The good news is it's solvable. As we like to say in our business, it's fixable. That's something that Anne and Francis both talk a lot about. I would say the shorthand on this particular situation would be to have the new leader, that human stepping into the new role, think about what was worked best for me in leaders that I have seen, that I've had the chance to work for and grow under. And I think when you use that lens, oftentimes the leader will start to understand, yes, I had a boss who perhaps cared a lot about me and was a friend, quote unquote, in certain ways, but probably held me to a pretty high bar. And that starts to help someone switch the lens of, great, if I can see what helped me, perhaps I can realize I need to change my approach a little bit here, because what's going to help my now team members who used to be peers is probably not a lot of friendship, though that's a nice underlying part of any organization if it's possible.
Thanks. So for the organizations that are identifying these next generation of leaders and they're helping them with your program and your training and so forth, are there any particular characteristics that you see as a common theme, and can you share some of those with the audience so that if they're out there thinking about who are my next gen leaders, what should they be looking for?
The first thing I think you will see is it is a far more representative group than ever historically. That's not surprising. Our demographics as a country in the US and across the world, everything's becoming more global. There's a lot broadly of different representation coming into businesses. So the good news is what we see is more representation coming up the ranks. Would we like even more? Yes, of course. But the good news is, as you're looking at your succession planning or your next generation of leaders, hopefully it's more representative than it's ever been. So that would be one thing. In terms of what leadership feels like, I would say the skills that are being valued are, much more around learning, not knowing, curiosity, not judgment. So in this world of really rapidly changing operating contexts, there's a term called VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, which I think many of us would associate with operating today. In environments like that, these skill sets needed are so different. It's not command and control. All of the data is not knowable. So as you're thinking about skill sets, leaders are looking for really that learning mindset, curiosity, the ability, resilience, the ability to navigate through that ambiguity.
Yeah, and those are great, and I like that we're talking about the soft skills and the key components of leadership, but some of the components are really about emotional intelligence, and some of that stuff may not be innate in some of these identified leaders. And one of the things that comes up a lot on this program and the conversations I have with leaders outside of the show is empathy. And do you either have it or you don't, or is that a teachable skill, Cara?
Yeah, I'm in the business of teaching leaders things. So my belief is many things are teachable. Hopefully all things are teachable if you have the right learning mindset. With that said, certainly there are folks who are more sort of naturally inclined to certain skill sets and whatnot. So of course, there's going to be some folks for whom empathy might be a more natural resting state. With that said, it is certainly a teachable skill. The way we think about it is, in the workplace at least, one of the things that can help leaders is thinking about empathy really in service of someone's success at work. So it's not, I need to be devoted to your success, broadly speaking, as a human, and therefore know everything about your partner or your children or your pets or your social life. But how can I think about being deeply interested in your success at work? So as I think about you and your role, as I think about you with the particular goals you have in mind, how can I be deeply committed to understanding success for you in that scope? And that can sometimes be a way leaders who might not naturally be as empathetic across the board, it's a way they can pivot a little bit and start to grow the skills around empathy as they think about particular scopes and workplaces.
Yeah, Cara, for folks who want to learn more about you or how they can work with you, what's the best way for them to get in contact?
I'm very friendly. I'd love to chat. They can always find me on LinkedIn. that's an easy way to find us. As I shared at the top of the call, the business is called the Leadership Consortium. So you can find us through that website. Again, you can find me through LinkedIn, and I'm always delighted to jam about leadership. So do drop a line.
That's awesome. So, Cara, we're just about coming up to a commercial break, but I want to try and sneak in one more thing if I can. And I want to ask you about the leaders that are in your program that don't necessarily align with their managers or leaders that put them there. And let me explain what I mean by that. So growing up, sometimes in leadership, you find that your boss doesn't necessarily represent a role model that you want to be. And then in going through your training, perhaps it's become even more highlighted for those accelerated leaders that my boss doesn't act that way. How do they then, or how do you help them navigate that difference between what they're aspiring to be and what they have to live with day to day as their role model leader?
I love the question, and what I would say is there's really the candid answer is there's really two paths forward. If you want to stay in that business working with that leader, you can choose to try to have a different relationship with that leader, and that's one path you can take. If for whatever reason you decide, my potential is best fulfilled elsewhere, that's also an option. We're strong believers that difference is really, really, truly a catalyst for growth, for development, for success. So we would be big advocates of saying you want a lot of difference. As long as it's productive difference, you want a lot of difference around you, above you, below you. And so there's probably really productive ways to harness the good parts of what you're seeing in the leadership above or around you, and then augment through your own strengths places that you might feel there are gaps.
Yeah, and you said the words that described what I was thinking and feeling, about highlighting these differences, because in growing up in my world, there were some leaders I thought that person is really great. I would like to be more like them. But more often than not, it was the learning from, boy, if I get a chance to be in leadership, I'm not going to be like that person. So anyway, Cara, don't go anywhere. We've got to pay a few bills, so sit tight. Folks at home watching and listening, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on Behind the Numbers after this quick break.
Have you ever tried to build people into a team? Maybe you've tried bowling, or ziplining, or paintball, or pizza making. These events can be fun, and they can make everybody happy for a while. But in the long run, do they really turn people into a team? Now, imagine the members of your team scattered all over the world, working from trains and airplanes, from remote offices, client locations, or working from home. How do you build a winning team when your playing field might be the entire world? With BCAT, we've created the answer. Working completely online, no matter where your people are, we turn them into an engaged and motivated team in 3 simple steps. First, we use the BCAT survey, which they can take online, anywhere, anytime, to reveal the North Star that represents their shared pride in the work they do. Next, we work with your team's leaders and stakeholders to convert that North Star into a role target, an ideal virtual person who represents your team's best self, living its best day at work. With our internet tools, we hang your North Star high in the sky, where everyone on your team can see it, no matter where in the world they might be. Then we guide and help everyone on your team in creating personal plans to align themselves with your team's North Star. We help each of them develop the positive habits that, day by day, every day, steer them closer to your North Star, aligning themselves with your team's signature dreams and ideals. And over the long haul, we offer programs and coaching techniques that help them stick to their plans. Remote team building isn't hard. It doesn't take long. And it's just as much fun as pizzas and paintball. You build winning teams around a purpose, not a place. BCAT is the answer. To build a highly functional virtual team, contact us at info@getbcat.com or call 1-855-999-BCAT 2228. Have you ever tried to build people into a team? Maybe you've tried bowling, or ziplining, or paintball, or pizza making. These events can be fun, and they can make everybody happy for a while. But in the long run, do they really turn people into a team? Now, imagine the members of your team scattered all over the world, working from trains and airplanes, from remote offices, client locations, or working from home? How do you build a winning team when your playing field might be the entire world? With BCAT, we've created the answer. Working completely online, no matter where your people are, we turn them into an engaged and motivated team in 3 simple steps. First, we use the BCAT survey, which they can take online, anywhere, anytime, to reveal the North Star that represents their shared pride in the work they do. Next, we work with your team's leaders and stakeholders to convert that North Star into a role target, an ideal virtual person who represents your team's best self, living its best day at work. With our internet tools, we hang your North Star high in the sky, where everyone on your team can see it, no matter where in the world they are.
And welcome back to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and today we're talking with Cara Shortsleeve, who is the CEO of the Leadership Consortium. Cara, welcome back. That was a quick break, and I am ready to rock and roll. Hope you are. Want to continue our conversation by talking about, I guess we'll call it themes. If you're seeing any particular trends in the folks that you're working with, and what's keeping leaders up at night?
The trends we are seeing, I would say the first trend is sort of an age-old, but it comes and goes with macroeconomic context, but the do more with less feeling. So the feeling of, with the world changing around us, we got to repurpose a lot of resources time and time again. So this feeling of how do I do more with less, that's coming up a lot. The second one that is really prevalent is just, what do I do as a leader today, given sort of the demands of corporate leadership, quote unquote, seem to have expanded so much. So I'm expected to have social points of views, political points of views. I'm expected to sort of gracefully knit those into my day job. So those are the two, sort of an internal pressure of I have to do more with what feels like less resource, and my job feels like it's getting a little bit bigger and more complex.
Yeah, I want to unpack the do more with less just a little bit, if you don't mind, because some of that do more with less means that the company is unfortunately downsizing and people were let go, and now everybody's got to kind of figure out how to, as you said, do more with less. And in that scenario of the downsizing, I've read a lot of statistics about what the impact on, we'll call them the survivors, are and their motivation. And what are you seeing, if anything, in terms of the, we'll call it the survivor syndrome? And how are these accelerated leaders learning how to deal with that to get people back and engaged in an environment where maybe the circumstances they live in day to day aren't ideal?
We do a lot of work actually with organizations who have, to your example, perhaps done a downsizing. There's other reasons why folks might also have large change moments. But to your point on that one particularly, we do a lot of work with organizations who are trying to ensure the leaders they have kept on staff feel excited, empowered, and are not struggling quite as much with that angst around I still have this great role and those that were here before me don't. So a lot of what we work on with those leaders is around the power of the transformational change itself. So regrounding and why. So what was the reason we made this change in the first place? Let's get back to that and understand it is likely to set the business up for long-term success. And so let's rally around that. That should be a productive, optimistic thing to think about. And then there's a big piece around honoring the past. So part of moving forward is to say, we have to honor what got us here. So there was a lot of good work that had been done. It's not that work doesn't stand on its own 2 feet. It's that we are now in a new phase. Strategy has changed and we need to move to a different corpus of work. So there's a piece around honoring the past that helps people understand there's a reason why they are still there. There's a reason why many were there before them. And the third piece is, of course, an optimistic path forward. So given we know why we need the change and we know there was lots of likely good and maybe challenge in the past. Now, how do we think about having an optimistic and rigorous path forward? So that's sort of your equivalent of the rally cry that will last through the hard work. So all to say, we do a lot of work with organizations who are in that moment of change, because what often happens is so much thought goes into the getting to the, perhaps new version of the organization or new version of the team. But truly, really, the hard work actually has yet to come, which is then how do we get the sort of new team, newly defined team unit marching forward. So that's a short-ish version to the question.
Yeah, really, really good. And that's where people start to develop their resilience chops, which is another one of the key components of being a leader. And unfortunately, you've got to go through a lot to really put together the whole toolbox of effective leadership. Some good, some not so good. Now watch this as a segue. So one of the things that I like to talk about in leadership is the analogy to sports. And when you talk about teams, people get traded, people retire, free agents are signed. So there's the analogy and the segue back to what happens if there's a do more with less scenario. But there's a lot of metaphors, there's a lot of analogies in the sports world. How do you bring that, if at all, into your leadership development?
You are speaking my language because I am an athlete, so sports have been a huge part of my own growth and development, and I always say sort of who I am as a leader today is who I've always been as an athlete. So in that way, I give you a nod that I speak that language and see so many corollaries in the workplace, where it might be sports for me, it might be, arts and entertainment for another human. So there's different ways to bring those corollaries in. But for me, as it relates to sports, the way I think about it with the leaders that we're working with is just that fundamental concept, A, of team, B, of joint direction. So when you think of a sports team, the good news is they typically, whether they all get along as humans, they have a shared desired outcome. So what is the strength of that? How can we make sure organizations have a shared desired outcome? There's usually very clear indications in sports around progress. So did you win the game? Did you not win the game? Was that a goal? Was that not a goal? So the corollary in the workplace is a real focus on data. So what are you going to measure? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to make that clear to the teams so they know which direction they're going and if they're getting there? So there's lots of great corollaries that come in. And if nothing else, a little corporate Olympics is always a fun way to bring out some nice competitive spirit from people. So also consider playing some games together.
Interesting. Corporate Olympics. Tell me more about that.
I'm a big fan of take people out of a standard operating context and have them do the work that you hope they will be doing, but give them a different context that might trigger different synapses to fire in their brain. So whether lots of folks can do that through puzzles, simulations, there's ways you can do it in sort of experiential learning, which I love. And you can also do it in things like the big wide world out there and get your team out and, do some sort of fun, competitive for sake of rising all the boats. So how can you get sort of comfort with some competitive spirit? Because competitive spirit can get a bad name, but I think it's one of the most important attributes you can have in business.
Yeah, and you said something that really just struck me. I would love for you to maybe share a couple thoughts on what are good, effective team building exercises. A lot of things that we see typically is we'll go to the bar, we'll do the happy hour thing, some in-office things, but what you just described there seemed really unique. Any other suggestions for really effective team building?
The things that I would think about as you're trying to do team building is, again, this power of difference. So you're going to have the humans on your teams are going to have very varied interests. They're going to have very varied skills. Oftentimes, you're not going to know the depth of someone's skill because the operating context that you have in any given team at any given moment can start to feel fixed. So somebody can have their quote-unquote day job, they stay in their lane, they have assigned tasks. However you want to do your team building, there should sort of be two objectives. One is that you can see people's skills coming to light in a different way. And two, you are seeing the humans in whatever unit you're trying to increase collaboration, you're seeing those humans connect in a different way. So I need to know if done well, I see that Cara has skills I didn't realize Cara had, and I see that the combination of Dave and Cara has netted something that I didn't see before. So that's what you hope for. Sometimes, yes, can you meet up and have a cocktail or a mocktail? Of course, but that doesn't often get people operating as differently as they often can. So things like experiential, you do a simulation, so you have people assuming different roles.
Hey, Cara, so how can people find you or connect with you if they want to learn more about you?
They're going to track me down on LinkedIn. I promise to be responsive, so I'm easy to find. There's not a whole lot of short sleeves out there in the world, so with the unique last name, you can usually find me. So please find me there. You can always contact me through the Leadership Consortium.org. So if you don't find me on LinkedIn, you can always find me through our site. And I'm delighted to connect. As I said at the top, we accelerate leaders. We accelerate leaders many different ways. The most common ones are we have an excellent one-on-one coaching program. We have an excellent sort of classroom-based leadership development program that runs 4 times a year. So delighted to educate folks on either one of those modalities.
That's great, and I can vouch for the fact that you are responsive on LinkedIn and otherwise. Cara, we're down to the real final short strokes here, but I want to give you the last word and maybe offer the audience some advice, some things that you're seeing where either leaders are going wrong or things that we should be doing better.
Final advice, just start, is something we talk about a lot. There's so many scary things happening out in the world. There's polarizing things. There's so much inertia because it can feel high stakes. I'm not sure what I should do. I don't know how to do the thing. I don't want to say the wrong thing. We just tell leaders, start. If you're thinking about some change, start with your baby steps, but start.
That's great advice. Just get the ball rolling. Cara, thank you so much for joining us today on Behind the Numbers. This was really a fun conversation.
Thanks for letting me join. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. We've been talking with Cara Shortsleeve, and she is the CEO of the Leadership Consortium. Definitely check her out. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and I'm known for helping my clients with their business valuations. So if you're a business owner and you don't know what the value of your business is, unfortunately many of you don't, we should probably have a conversation. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I want to thank the Big Cheese for running the board today. Good job over there, big guy. Also want to thank you out there for watching and listening. We really appreciate you supporting the program. That's all we have for today. We'll see you next time on Behind the Numbers. Take care, everybody.